Well, welcome to Talk 11B. This is my second part of Talk 11. And this is about the rise of science and its connection with Christianity and how we got to the place we have now, where science effectively doesn't respect Christianity in the way that it did in the past. Professor Harrison makes a point in his book about the rise of science and the fall of Adam, that the original scientists of the 17th century in Britain were very clearly trying to find out the knowledge that Adam once had before he fell into sin. And the scientists were very much believers in the biblical worldview and would certainly have believed that the Bible was an accurate revelation from God. And Bacon, who's often considered the father of modern science, the reason he argued for a community of scientists to, in a sense, peer review each other's work was the genuine belief that individuals could not just by themselves work out the world because they were fallen, they were sinful people, they had limited resources in terms of their intellect. And therefore it required a community to work incrementally, slowly but surely, to gain knowledge, rather than the Greek notion of the bright person like Aristotle or Plato sitting there thinking and somehow working out the entire world by themselves. And this, what we take for granted, this notion of peer review, of incremental knowledge, of experimentation, all came out of a Christian worldview based on the fallen state of humanity. Now, in the 18th century, that sort of theistic position was replaced by what you might call a deistic position, where God, as it were, was a remote clockmaker who created the universe and then left it to its own devices. And in effect, all reference to a God who might intervene in history or might have miracles was, as it were, written out of the script. And you have people like Hume arguing against miracles. But it was effectively the case that the scientific world was not interested in miracles. And of course, one of the miracles it was not interested in ultimately would be the miracle of the worldwide flood. And so you have a Hutton and Lyell between them coming up with a theory of uniformitarianism, which said the present is the key to the past, and all reference to a worldwide flood creating the landscapes we see around us simply gets erased. And so by 1820, 1830, the new geology departments, the geological departments of the Western world, were being formed, and the study of the rocks was being codified. And at this point, it was decided that the only way to get into professorships, or the only way to have research grants, the only way to be really listened to, was if you held up to the uniformitarian view. And so the scriptural geologists were ignored. And though they had cogent arguments for saying this can't be millions of years old, I mean, you've got tree trunks growing through whole layers of coal. Those must have all been laid down in a cataclysmic flood. The fact that people found these fossilized tree trunks through multiple layers of rock and coal, showing clearly that they must have been laid down rapidly in one flood, was just ignored. And they were never engaged with, and they simply died out by 1840. And this is written about by Terry Mortensen in his book, The Turning Point, The Great Turning Point. And so once the geologists have established that the Earth is millions of years old, then the Bible loses its credibility, because it's quite clearly not what you're getting from the first 11 chapters of Genesis. And it's only, therefore, a logical conclusion that you're going to end up with evolution, which is what Darwin comes up with in 1859. But Darwin's theory of evolution is building on what had already been established in the 1820s. And to be honest, the 18th century had already abandoned the concept of God and the way that the Bible describes him and his relationship with his created world. And from Darwin onwards, it is inevitable that the scientific world is going to be at odds with the biblical narrative. And that is why I spent the first 6 talks really detailing the scientific arguments for a recent creation and a worldwide flood, because the scientific world doesn't have to be at odds with the Bible, but at the moment it is. Thank you for listening.